Mother Nature is drunk. So welcome to the Golf Jitsu podcast. Obviously, it's me, Joe, and Nick. But we have a very, very special guest for you guys today. I know if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen me doing wacky exercises with this thingamabob. This is the GOLFFOREVER swing trainer. We have actually one of the co-inventors of the swing trainer, Pete Holman. Pete is a physical therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, international presenter, author, fitness product inventor, and former US National TaeKwon-Do champion. Pete hails from Colorado, so we're going to talk about martial arts. Basically where I got my name, Golf Jitsu, from was, basically the correlation between golf and jiu-jitsu. We're going to talk about his history, how he came up, how he got it started in fitness, how he came up with this wonderful device that actually Scotty Scheffler used. You probably saw it on, I think, his episode 2 of Full Swing, where JT inadvertently actually promoted it for them, which was pretty great. But I'll do it for you, JT. Here, I put it around. I know you can't see it because of the glare, but ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Mr. Pete Holman. What's up, my man?
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, good.
Yes. How are you, sir?
Nice to meet you officially.
I know. We've been messaging each other for like a year already, right? Back and forth. And
it's so weird with social. You feel like you know somebody. I guess you kind of do, but we'll make it official here.
Yeah. We're e-meeting, right?
Yeah. And Nick, nice to meet you.
You too, Pete. It's great to have you on.
So just so you know, Pete, we have a nor'easter hitting us right now with like 40-mile-an-hour winds, and I spoke to one of our other partners earlier, and he was like, "Dude, power's out." So I was like, "Well, listen, if you worst case scenario, hotspot your phone if you have to, but if you can't make it, no worries." And
make sure you use your last ounces of battery for the podcast, Pete. Don't worry about emergency phone calls or anything.
That's wild.
Dude, well, listen, if you have to go charge your phone, you just go sit in your car, you charge the phone, and that's it. It's easy, right? That's it.
Hey, so we're hardcore around here. It's golf jitsu. I mean, come on, what do you expect?
Yeah. You go big or you go home. So Pete, you grew up in Colorado, right?
Since I was 7. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I was doing a little reading up on you. So you grew up on a farm?
A small ranch in Littleton, and there was chickens running around, and we boarded horses. That was one of the ways we generated some alternative revenue streams. And so we'd board horses, and my mom thought it was a great idea. But guess who got to muck the stalls and fix all the fences and haul concrete and road base around? It was me. So it was a pain, but it also gave me some early foundations for strength training, because when you do loaded carries, holding heavy wheelbarrows and push them and pull them and lift them around, you start building some strength in your core and your grip and your hips. And I think that was the start of my later success in martial arts in my athletic career, was just building that foundational pillar strength on the farm.
Now, was martial arts your first love?
No, soccer.
Really? Okay.
Yes, I love soccer, man. I did soccer camps early on, and I was pretty gifted soccer. I wasn't super fast, but I had really good feet, and defensively I was very strong. And in fact, I played goalie. One game our goalie got injured, and they put me in for goalie because I was kind of tall and lanky, and I had like 7 saves. It was insane. And the coach said, "Guess who's goalie now?" And so I played competitively. And then, I don't know, like sometime I went to prep school. I went to like a kind of a fancy prep school. My parents were educators. and they were both had doctoral degrees in psychology, and so they had this idea to put me into kind of this prep school. And for 2 years, I went to the prep school. If you didn't play lacrosse in the prep school, you were a chump. You were nobody. So I quit soccer and played lacrosse. And if you've ever tried lacrosse, it's not something you just pick up overnight. I mean, you have to have stick skills and ball. You got to be able to catch and throw the ball on the run. And it's actually a really cool, fun, exciting sport, but not to learn. And so, long story short, I quit my love and played lacrosse, and then ended up not pursuing soccer. But later, when I got into martial arts, boy, did that soccer and footwork and my ability to control my lower extremities come into play with learning how to do kicks and for Taekwondo.
So how old were you when you started Taekwondo?
Well, I don't know if it's embarrassing or not, but I didn't find Taekwondo until I was 20, 21 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And,
so late.
Yeah. And so I started training. I was at a health club. I was recovering from a knee injury from skiing. Growing up in Colorado, you also skied. Everybody skied. I wanted to be a downhill ski racer, and then I wanted to be a bump, like a mogul race, competitor. And then I wanted to be a Warren Miller ski star. And you guys maybe are too young to know who Warren Miller is, but back in the day, Warren Miller made all the big ski movies where it really launched extreme skiing. And it never panned out. I'm 6'2", 225 pounds. So I'm not the best guy to be hucking off cliffs. I would just explode when I landed. But it got me, involved in athletics and speed. And so I'm recovering from a knee injury. I'm working at a health club, and they had a Taekwondo class. And I always was fond of Bruce Lee. I was always enamored by Sugar Ray Leonard was an idol of mine, Muhammad Ali. Something about the athleticism and the competitive nature of fighting, I always gravitated towards. I just never had the opportunity. And at this health club, it was actually funny. I was mopping floors. So I was a maintenance guy at this health club, and the Taekwondo court was number 6. Well, court number 7 was across the way, and it was the cleanest court of all, because I would just sit there and mop court number 7 for like 45 minutes and just kept repetitively cleaning this court, watching the guys train in Taekwondo. And finally, the instructor, it was like a Chinese Kung Fu movie. The instructor opens up the door, and he kind of startled me, and he looked at me dead in the eyes, and he said, "Why don't you put the mop down and come train with us?" And I said, "Okay." And that was it. And I started training 3 days a week. The next thing you knew, I was just geeked out. Like, I stretched 5 times a day. The coach said, "Hey, you got to stretch. Your flexibility is terrible." I stretched 5 times a day. I trained 8 times a week. All I did was Taekwondo. And within a year and a half, I was testing for my black belt, which is, kind of unheard of. Nobody does that. And I was green. Believe me, I was still pretty green. But then 2 years later, my coach said, "You're really gifted. You have a chance of making a national team if you want to try out for the national team." And I was nervous, but I tried out, and I made my first national team. And then 3 years later, I was the team captain for the World Championships in 1997 in St. Petersburg, Russia. And so I loved martial arts. I excelled it. And it's kind of a testament, if you really put your mind to something and hunker down and you're smart about how you're training, and then obviously you got to have the heart and the passion for it, but you can do things.
You gotta like pain too.
Well, you do, because there's different types of pain, right? There's physical pain, and then there's mental pain. Golf is mental pain all day long. You have to have some serious mojo. I was just watching Scotty Scheffler, and this guy, he could be a brain surgeon. I'm convinced. He's so flat and even which is good, but I'm like so wound up and so, fiery that martial arts was great for me. But I also got involved in physical therapy and became a physical therapist, a licensed physical therapist. And the whole reason I became a physical therapist is because I was healing myself constantly from the training and the competition of Taekwondo. I was always injured, always torn up, a joint, a muscle strain, a ligament sprain. Something was always wrong, and it got me kind of immersed in physical therapy. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool. You can really learn the body. And the more you know about the body and how to heal the body, the longer and stronger you can perform. And so I really owe a lot of my career to martial arts. It got me interested in physical therapy. It got me interested in strength and conditioning, which I became a certified strength and conditioning specialist because of that. And later it helped with my product innovations, because understanding how the body works and biomechanics and kinesiology is imperative when you start training, or when you start creating and innovating in this fitness space.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, do you train any type of martial arts still to this day, or have you retired?
It's funny. I'm kind of retired. Funny story. So I'm in LA. I'm at this gym called the Dog Pound Gym, and they actually have kind of a cool little martial arts section. So I'm hitting the speed bag. I still hit the speed bag a lot. I like that because it's lighter and it's more rhythm and timing, and I just it's fun too. It's just a fun thing to do. But anyhow, they had some heavy bags hanging, and I'm like, you know what? Let me, kind of mix it up. And so I'm kind of popping the bags with my feet a little bit, with my hands, and I felt pretty good. The next day, I mean, like every joint in my body, because when you've trained on the heavy bag for years, it's your joints are never the same. It's really not that great of a modality. It's got its place, but I did it way too much and way too aggressively. And so my knee is finally recovering from a week ago from kicking the bag.
Oh, so this was recent.
This was literally last week. And
okay.
I tried to stretch a couple days ago, and I'm like, man, why does my knee hurt so bad? And then it's like, idiot, you were kicking a 120-pound heavy bag, doing side kicks and trying to show off. Just, I'm still learning, guys. It's a process.
I think we all are. I remember one time we had a bell test, and we were doing what's called deep half guard. And I went to do a sweep on my partner was a lot bigger than I was, and I went to do a sweep on him, and he was supposed to let me sweep him, but I went full tilt, and I ended up heel hooking myself because he stayed still, and my body just went. And I remember sitting off at the side, and my knee just blew up like a balloon. And for 6 months, I couldn't swing a golf club. I would go to class, like just wear a knee brace just to try to, once it started swelling up again, I was okay. But it's just like, yeah, once you hit 40, it's no joke. Like it's all downhill from there. Everything just starts falling apart,
Well, yeah. And that's the second part of my career, both physically for my own personal health and well-being, and then also for my product innovations. It's all about longevity and durability. And, I'll never forget when I was working for TRX in San Francisco, there was a park where next to where my daughter went to school. She went to this little school called Yik-Wo, and it was on next to this hill. And every morning I would drop her off for school, and there was no short of 100 people working out in this park. And I was just enamored by this. So one day after driving by, 5 or 6 times, I pulled over after I dropped the kiddo off, and I said, I'm going to go check this out. And I got out and I started walking around, and I noticed as I got closer, it was all Asians, every single person there. And there were little pods, little groups of Asians. And some were doing Tai Chi. Some were doing, some actually had like Chinese Kung Fu instruments, like half, bow staffs and like sword work. And it just was beautiful. And then as I got even closer to them, they were all like in their 60s and 70s. I mean, from a distance, I thought, who are these badasses, And then I got closer, and I'm like, that's my mom, like out there. Yeah. Literally. So I was so impressed. And the way they moved, their grace, their fluidity, nothing was fast and explosive. It was just fluid and smooth, but they had range of motion. You could tell they had strength, they had balance, they had mobility, and they had this fluid grace to them. And I can tell they were going to live a nice, long, functional life into their 90s and even some centurions. And I thought, man, that's more of what I need. The strength, the mobility work, and the flow. And it's kind of golf, isn't it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. But don't you think too, like when you look at it from that aspect, it's like a body in motion stays in motion. You know, as soon as you become stagnant, that's when everything falls apart. Like where I know I felt that during the lockdowns, right? Where I couldn't train. Initially, you could play golf, but how many times a week am I going to go out and play golf for 4 or 5 hours?
Right.
But I couldn't train. I couldn't do anything. And I felt my body over those 2 years deteriorating. And then once I got back on the mats, all of a sudden the hip pain's gone, the back pain's gone, all the pain is gone because you start moving again, or like what we call so in jiu-jitsu, what you described with them doing the Tai Chi and all the katas, we call flow rolling. Yeah. So it's all about position. It's all about like that, just slowing it down, you know, so you can basically read your opponent and see where they're going to go. So you know how to play against them. And it's something that we use. Like if I'm training like a white belt or a new you know, a white belt, you know, I'm always pushing them like, listen, flow, I don't want to feel your strength. You know, I'm going to let you do these moves. We're just going to move so you get used to get your body used to moving this way, get your hips used to feeling this weirdness, because that weirdness is going to turn into a sweep or whatever. And the same thing transitions to golf, because when, you know, if I'm working on my swing, which I've been working on all winter, one of the frustrating things for me was, you know, I had to slow it down to like 25%. You know, with the swing chain, and then slowly build it back up. And that's the frustrating part, where you used to go in full tilt. Now you got to slow it down, get the mechanics, and you know, get your body moving the way it should move and whatnot. So yeah. Well,
there's a famous saying in strength and conditioning, and it goes, you got to slow down to speed up. And it makes a lot of sense, right? When you're learning a new movement pattern or a new technique, you do it slow, and then you layer in speed over time, and eventually it becomes more explosive, more dynamic, more ballistic in nature. But sometimes you kind of forget it, and you want to go right to that high speed acceleration, all the sexy stuff. And even for veteran athletes or veteran golfers, sometimes you got to slow down, and you got to pause at the backswing. You got to pause at different parts, and you got to sequentially build up your swing again, or build up your mobility patterns. And also, as we age, it takes longer to warm up. You know, it's one of the hallmarks of the Golf Forever program is just focusing and doubling down on the warm up. And I know, so I got into, once I retired from martial arts or from Taekwondo, once I turned 45, I learned there was something called masters boxing. I honestly didn't know about this. And so I was training some clients in New York, and I would stay there for 6-8 weeks sometimes. And there's a gym called Gleason's Gym, which is a very famous gym. Arturo Gatti trained there, and Zab Judah and all these famous guys. And anyhow, they have a tournament every year. It was the Gleason's International Masters Boxing Tournament. And so I was like, oh, competition, you know, as a 45-year-old. And so I started training for that and looking to compete in the Gleason's International Masters Boxing Tournament. Well, what I noticed was normally, you know, sometimes I could warm up in literally 3-5 minutes back in the day. Now, if it's 20, 25, 30 minutes, it takes me to literally warm up. And it was always annoy the coaches, because they, you know, it'd be a sparring day, and I'd show up at, you know, 10 a.m. to spar. And that doesn't mean I spar at 10 a.m. That means I show up at 10, and, you know, by 10:30, 10:35, I'm okay. I'm sweating. I'm mobilized. I've got some core activation drills. I'm flowing. I'm ready to go. And they'd want me to spar, you know, like at 10:10. And I would say, guys, I'm 45 years old. I ain't, you know, and then I had to spar 28-year-old kids. It's like, no. So it just takes you longer, and you got to be a little more thorough and in depth on your warm-ups as you age.
But it feels real good when you're a 45-year-old and you're crushing a 20-something, doesn't it?
It kind of did. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was funny because you know, they don't know you from Chernobyl when you walk in there. You look like I look like a big, blocky, you know, slow dude. And they didn't know I had a background in martial arts. And granted, I was way better with my feet than I was with my hands. But, you know, you learn how to use your hands. And I trained Kempo karate, and I did some other stuff. And I did tough man boxing tournaments. And so, you know, it would start out, and they would be, you know, telling their kid, hey, do this, do that, do that. And all of a sudden, you know, I'd snap out a jab, and like, hey man, stop getting hit in the face with this jab. Next thing you know, they started coaching me. Like they love to see talent, and they're like, man, he got some skills. This kid from the urban,
the Midwest.
Cities,
That's crazy. But it feels, but again, it feels so good when you're basically destroying somebody who's almost half your age.
It was good, but
I mean?
you always get there's level sets, right? And I'm sure you guys have golfed with people like this, and you think, hey, you're like, your swing's feeling good, everything's good, and all of a sudden you golf with somebody, and you're like, oh boy, I got a lot to work on. And there was a guy in the gym, so I sparred a bunch of these younger guys, and then this guy was a little bit older. He's maybe 32, 33, Israeli guy, heavyweight, but he kind of looked slow. He was had a little pudge around his midsection and stuff. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to run circles around this dude. Well, it turns out he was an ex-pro, had like 12 fights, and his timing and his accuracy and his just calm defense. I mean, I would throw 4 really good techniques, and he would block 3, and on the 4th one, he'd counter me in the middle of my swing. I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a long night. And, so I definitely got level set there. And, but hey, we're all just doing the best we can, and trying to compete and just trying to get better in your own. That's one thing I really love about golf. It's so individual. And I'm not a competitive golfer. Honestly, I probably never will be. You do little tournaments here and there, but I compete with myself, and I'm very competitive with myself. And so I want to get better to prove to myself that I can follow a sequence, be disciplined, work on motor control and skill acquisition, and improve my game. And I think if you approach it from that mindset, it's much funner game to play. If you start competing with other guys from the club, there's always going to be some kid that went to Stanford and played 4 years of college or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe he's dropped off a little, but they still have that, skill set from the intensive training.
So what, I've drawn the correlation between golf and say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because just to reiterate what you said, whenever I go on the mat, or I go through a class and we do live rolls after class, I want to be 1% better than I was the night before. You know what I mean? So I went and trained last night, and it was like my first time back in 3 weeks. And I thought my cardio was going to be destroyed. I thought I was going to be in pain. I thought I was going to lose my strength and my skills, but it is that muscle memory when you've been training for so long that, you start relearning how to breathe again, where it's like, okay, I really don't need to be exerting myself this hard right now. And it all comes back really quick. So when I go, say, if I'm going to go train tomorrow night, I'm like, all right, well, I want to be 1% better than I was on Monday night. And the same thing with golf, right? But the problem with golf is that, or the thing with golf is that every time I've ever felt like I've grasped it, where I got this game, I don't think I break 100 the next round, and that's the thing. But they're both these sports, right? And I'm saying it, golf is a sport, just like jiu-jitsu is a sport, that you're playing against yourself, and I think it was Ben Hogan who said it, where, the golf is played the 5 inches between your ears, and it's a total mind, where I guess one of the things that I find challenging is that on the martial arts side, right, with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I could deal with the mental pain and the physical pain and everything. The golf, I fold like a leaf. So if you ever want to play me for money, you'll take my money.
Well, it is very interesting, right? The parallels between golf and martial arts. And I was thinking about this the other day because of this podcast. I'm like, what really are? So I boiled it down to 3 similarities. I think the first one is focus. You cognitive focus. Martial artists, and this goes for other sports, that have dire consequences. Martial arts, if you're not focused, you're either going to get knocked out or you're going to get submitted. Those are 2 pretty dire consequences. If you're not focused in golf, and if you can't quiet the chatter, the internal chatter, and the ambient noise around you, you're in a water feature, you're in a sand trap, you're in the rough. So you've got to have some mental cognitive focus. The second similarity between golf and martial arts is breath control. If you can control your breath, and maybe even firearm training, like sniper training or something is similar, right? If you can control your breath, you can control your mind. And so, just like martial arts, when you're rolling, I'm sure you love rolling with guys that are new, right? Because they exert tons of energy. They try to muscle through everything. They can't control their breath. And after 2 minutes, they are gassed out. Like, if you've never done jiu-jitsu, trust me, 2 minutes in jiu-jitsu is it's like running uphill for a mile. If you've never done it, and you are so exhausted that you almost would just rather roll over and die. And so once you control that breath, you slow everything down. And that's, again, when you can focus, you have better cognitive focus and you're not so into your physiology. And then the third thing I think is similar between martial arts and golf is controlling rotational forces, controlling rotation and producing rotation. So if you go to do a single leg takedown or some kind of shoulder, hip throw, there's a rotational component to that throw. If you do a kick or a punch or spin technique in Taekwondo, there's massive rotational loads. I've got really long legs and kind of a big butt. So when I would spin and do a kick with my heel I could generate so much force. It's unbelievable. It's like a baseball bat swinging around. And it's the same thing with golf, right? You have to be able to control your backswing and have focus there. And then you have to have come down with some velocity and acceleration and impact and be able to control those rotational forces. So, there's a lot of similarities to golf and martial arts that, you don't necessarily think of. And in fact, I did a whole series for Golf Forever. They're buried in the exercise library, but they're called the Golf Ninja series. And
yes.
So every one, one workout's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? So the Crouching Tiger in Chinese or Shaolin, Kung Fu is real low stances, right? Tons of hip mobility and big sweeping shoulder turns. And so it was all focused on mobility and end range strength, which you need in golf. And then the Hidden Dragon is, Dragon has that explosive fire. And so you got to be able to harness that energy and then let it go real quick and rapidly. And that's where you get your rotational power from. So those were more like big, long end range holds and then let go of it, stretch the elastic resistance, stretch the rubber band, and load to explode. So anyhow, that's your Golf Ninja stuff. I could talk all day long about golf and martial arts.
That's a really interesting comparison for me, right? I'm not a martial arts guy, and I'm an okay golfer. So sort of those parallels are really, really fascinating for me. But one of the things that I've sort of learned as I've gotten older is identifying my limitations, right? Like Joe said, every time you do something, you want to get 1% better. But at the same time, understanding performance-wise, realistically, where you're at. So I had a couple knee injuries a few years ago that it took me a while to get back from. So with your physical therapist background, I tore both patellar tendons at the same time. Yeah. So part of the process recovering from that was, what can I do? How far can I push? Where am I at? And coming back to playing golf was a really, really eye-opening experience for me, because it wasn't about how far I could hit the ball 3 years ago. It's about what my body's allowing me to do right now. And from what you guys are talking about from a martial arts perspective, it seems like that applies as well, right? Like knowing what moves you're capable of, knowing your skill level, but at the same time, putting your ego in check to make sure you can perform to what you're capable of.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that because that's kind of Bruce Lee's philosophy. Bruce Lee started something called GOLFFOREVER, which was this kind of an amalgamation of all these different martial arts. And his philosophy was very unique and novel and kind of not well received at the time, because a lot of martial artists are dogmatic in their approach and they have an orthodoxy to their practice. which is just historically that's how it's been. So if you're a Kempo karate guy, that's your thing. If you're, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, that's your thing. Although Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you watch Royce Gracie back in the day, he could strike. He threw low kicks. He had a jab. He understands striking. But the point is, they were all kind of orthodox. Bruce Lee said, forget all that. He said, some people are built, they're short and squat. Well, if you don't have a long jab, you're not going to train the jab all day long. You're going to work on single leg takedowns and getting in close and closing the distance and closing the range. You're going to work to your strengths. And so I think golf is similar. Like some people, they're going to have limited mobility. Maybe they have a hip replacement or whatever the case is. And you've got to work around and work within your constraints. And then hopefully expand some of those constraints too. A lot of people use that as an excuse. And I'm not talking about you, Nick, necessarily. I'm just saying a lot of people say, well, let me use the hip surgery example. I had a hip replacement, so it's never going to work the same. Well, that's not necessarily the best mindset to have, because if you look at modern day hip replacements, they're unbelievable. And if you rehab properly and if you train properly, you can get pretty darn near full range of motion, pretty outstanding strength, and still have rotational power. But you have to approach it in that focused, disciplined way and go through all your therapy. So yeah, you're always working within your limits. And that's part of the ego. Golf is a big ego game, right? So you see this all the time. People show up at the driving range, right? And you're looking, I don't know about you guys, but I always look for who's the best golfer out there. Because sometimes I'm literally like, I just want to watch this guy or gal swing. And through osmosis, somehow I'm going to figure something out, right? Yeah. So I'm panning around. And there's a couple dudes hitting the driver. And you hear this whack, right? And so you're instantly gravitated towards them. But then if you take your time, you look over at the putting greens or the chipping area, and there's some scrawny kid over there that's 140 pounds soaking wet, and he's chipping. And you start to look at his spray pattern, and every ball's like 6 feet within the hole, and he's 25 yards out. And you kind of go, oh, that's my dude. That's the best golfer on the course right now or on the range. And he's not doing the big, sexy, fun stuff. He's doing those fundamental routines of chipping and putting and the short game. And so, you don't have to bomb the ball off the tee. You got to hit it straight, and you got to be really good on your short game. And then if you're Scotty Scheffler, you're good at pretty much everything. That's why you're the best golfer in the world.
Well, that's sort of sorry. So one of the things I've always picked up on, and something that I've put into practice over the last couple of years, is when I do train and when I do practice, it's with a purpose. It's not just arbitrarily hitting clubs. So when I'm on the range, I look for the person that has some methodology to what they're doing. One of my buddies, I play with him a lot, is the most deliberate range player I've ever seen in my life. And he believes in it and he sticks to it. And that's something else as I've gotten older and as I've matured, put the head cover on the driver, practice with a purpose, move with a purpose. Maybe that's another one of those parallels between your martial arts background is sort of having that belief in what you're doing and that it's working and that it's making you that 1% better.
I love that, Nick. And to, dovetail onto that, not just practice with a purpose, but focus on your weaknesses, right? So in martial arts, my power tools my feet were both really good. And then I had a right hand. So my coach used to always say I was right hand happy. He said, hey, happy right hand, settle down, because if you've ever watched boxing or Taekwondo or kickboxing, you can't throw too many right hands. It just takes a lot of energy. If you miss, you're off balance. There's a lot of precautionary tales to overdoing the right hand. But I was right hand happy. Well, I had a tournament in Russia, and I dislocated my 4th and 5th metacarpals, and that was a surgical intervention. It took 6 to 8 weeks to heal, and in that 6 to 8 weeks, I had a cast and I had pins in my wrist. and I couldn't throw any right hands. Well, guess what? My left hand, I started out and I said, oh, this kind of sucks. I don't want to work on my left hand. And that's all I had to do. So 8 weeks later, you guys, I came back and my coach said, Holman, you've got a left hand. Where did this come from? And so it was a great lesson in just, don't always focus on what you're great at and what's sexy and what other people are going to ooh and ah over. Focus on stuff that you know in your heart you need work on, and set your ego aside. And maybe this goes to life in general, relationship work, in business, if you're terrible at taxes or administration or whatever it is, double down on that stuff. And the next thing you know, you're much better, more rounded golfer and a more rounded individual.
That's a great point. Pete. I have a question for you that I actually never got to ask you, that I've been waiting for this day to ask you. How did you get involved with Golf Forever?
That's a great question. And it's been such a great journey. So I'm a physical therapist and strength coach up in Aspen and a product innovator. And I knew Jeremy James, Dr. Jeremy James is the founder of Golf Forever, and he was a chiropractor in Aspen. So he and I had known each other for years, and our paths would cross. We weren't really super friendly, like we didn't hang out, but we'd see each other, and because we're in the same industry, we instantly bonded. And he launched this company called Golf Forever. He was seeing a bunch of clients that would come in as a chiropractor that had sore and aching backs, and they said, hey, I'm struggling in playing golf. Can you fix me? And as he started muscle testing them and looking at their mobility and their balance, he said, you guys, you're weak in the core. You've got no more mobility in your hips and no mobility in your thoracic spine, and you don't have good balance. So let me start working with these things on with you. And he decided, I should just make an app, and then I can give this to all my clients and kind of proliferate message faster and more efficiently. So he started this app in this company called Golf Forever. At one point, he approached me, said, Pete, I know you've done a lot of content and you're good on camera. Oh, I'd love for you to film some segments, some workouts on golf. And of course, I alluded to the fact that I'm not like a high-level golfer. He's like, it doesn't matter. You're a high-level strength coach, and golfers are not dissimilar to any other athlete. They all need the same things: flexibility, mobility, balance, core strength, explosive rotational power. And so I said, that's fair enough. And he really sold me on it. So I said, all right, I'll do some video content. At one point, he asked me, I developed a product called the TRX Rip Trainer, and it's an asymmetrical bar with an elastic resistance cord that you would anchor, and you'd kind of push and pull and rotate with this thing. And it was a great performance training device that I've sold all over the world. And he said, maybe we should partner with TRX. And oh, you got it right there. Nice, Joe. Maybe you should partner with TRX, and we can offer an affiliate kind of discount and code with them, and we can start selling that and creating some content. And jokingly, I said, we should make our own Rip Trainer and make it better. Because I've never been, since we launched the Rip Trainer, I don't know, 13 years ago, they haven't iterated it once. It's the same hunk of steel, kind of old school garden rake handles, heavy, clunky, just not, there's been no innovation in 12 years on it. And so I said, we should make our own and make it better. Of course, I was just joking. And then he called me a week later. He said, can we do that? And then we both kind of got excited. And a year later, so this was 1 year ago at the Orlando PGA show, we launched the product. And it is so, Joe, I don't need to tell you or sell you, but it's lightweight, it's aluminum, it's techie, the grips are awesome. It's got coaching zones, so we can coach and cue our through the app. It's got beautiful closed-end ball bearings, so the swiveling eye bolts just smooth and buttery. And then there's also weighted ball heads, so you can swing it like a overweighted club. But the magic, I think, is in the elastic resistance and manipulating that bar on the cord in space, pushing, pulling, and rotating. And you build strength, not just strength at impact, but at the end ranges. So your backswing, you build mobility and strength at the end range. And then you, again, load to explode. You start working on that stored kinetic potential energy, which is at the end of your backswing. And if you can't get that range, you're not going to have any power. So we mobilize your joints, give you the range, and then we give you strength at the end range. And once you have that combination of mobility and strength, boom, that turns into power. And that's where you start going, wow, I just hit it 250 yards. Like I've never hit it that far before. And it's not a huge deal if you hit it 280 and then you start hitting at 300, but it is a big deal if you're hitting 200 and then all of a sudden you're hitting 230, because it's a bigger leap, right? In that distance, and it's going to get you better and in a better position on your second shot. So, but mainly it's just about the fluidity of the swing, the power of the swing, and then also training the opposite side. That's one thing golfers historically do not understand until they get injured, which they all do, is that it's a dominant, asymmetrically loaded, mechanical overuse pattern. The swing pattern is not a natural motion. I mean, take any athlete, take Steph Curry. Well, actually, he's a really good golfer. Never mind. Take Draymond Green, okay, and give him a golf club and watch him try to swing it. It's not natural. Like even the most elite level athletes don't really understand it, because the body's not really designed to bend and twist and rotate in that fashion. A baseball swing is much more natural. So in order to balance out the body, you've got to do some movement patterns from the opposite side, your non-dominant side, and strengthen the non-dominant side, mobilize the non-dominant side, and that helps create some symmetry and balance in the muscles. As a physical therapist, one of the first things we look at when somebody comes in and they're injured is, do they have muscle balance and symmetry from left to right? If they don't, we got to address that and try to create some more balance in the body.
So one thing I can say is that when, like during COVID, when we were on lockdown, I went out and bought a rowing machine, which I liked at first, but it totally killed my lower back. Then I got some weights, and I was doing what are those weights? That move called, where you get that the Russian
kettlebell swing?
Kettlebell swings. Yeah, I'm sorry. Total brain fart on that one. I was doing kettlebell swings, messed up my back tremendously. It wasn't until I started working with the swing trainer where I felt so much more comfortable, and I felt like I was getting my mobility, the balance, those core muscles, like the stabilizing muscles back, where my back didn't hurt anymore. Where it was like me going to a gym, because I'm one of those guys, like I can't just go to the gym. I'm not 20 years old anymore. I can't just go to the gym and start honking weights and try to get up, because we're the same height. I'm 6'2". Like right now I'm about 189 pounds, but I'm usually float around like 205. But when I was lifting, I was like 220, like this. Yeah. And I just can't do that anymore. I find it incredibly boring, where it's like, the static exercise that you do with jujitsu, it's like playing chess. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm getting cardio, I'm getting strength training, I'm getting conditioning all at the same time, where I don't even have to think about it. And in terms of me, when it comes to working out, I think I've told you this, like I don't want to work out. I look forward to using the swing trainer, because it's fun. It's fun.
That's so important. And something you said, Joe, that really stood out to me is you commented on, it's not working like the big, like externally visible muscles, your chest and your lats and the stuff that you would typically do in the gym bodybuilding. It's working the smaller intrinsic muscles that are important or imperative in joint centration and stacking the joints and stabilizing the joints and creating some joint integrity in your hips and your low back and your thoracic spine and your shoulder joints. And those muscles, again, it's not quite as sexy as doing a bench press or a squat or a deadlift. But man, if you don't work on those intrinsic muscles, it's almost like a Formula One car. A famous strength coach uses this analogy all the time. His name's Mike Boyle. And he talks about a Formula One car. And he says, the most important part of a Formula One car, it's not the engine with 1,000 horsepower. It's the brakes.
Right.
If you don't have brakes in that car, guess what? You're going into the wall on the first turn, and it's going to blow up. Your body's kind of the same way. And what happens when you're young, you work on these big, powerful, sexy muscles. You don't work on all the small intrinsic stabilizers in your hip and your knee and your ankle and your low back and your shoulder. And that's what we do in Golf Forever. We work on all that stuff that needs it. And then, we do some bigger sweeping motions. But once you're tuned up, once you got the brakes going, and you can accelerate and decelerate and control your body in three-dimensional space, that's when you can start to open up and become and really express your athletic potential.
Well, I've also found that working with it, like when I get on when I'm not traveling, like I think you and I had the conversation where it's like, I wish there was like, is there any way we could get one that can cut in half so I could put it in the overhead on a plane? But when I'm traveling locally, and I can bring it in a hotel, I'm sure you've seen my videos where I'm like doing it in a hotel. My kids and wife love to make fun of me about when I post those videos. But when I get into that rhythm of using it, I've found that when I play like a full round of golf and when we play, we walk. My hips don't hurt. I don't have to take Advil at the start. I don't have to take Advil at the ninth hole to keep me going because those stabilizing muscles are keeping my body fresh. It's just like when I lifted weights, when I started, it's great to do a bench press, but like now take that bar out and now do dumbbells, and do the same weight. And you're going to feel like this feels like it's like 30 pounds heavier because now I have to stabilize my arms. I don't have this arm helping this arm out. Right. I'm now using all those little, the arms in your chest and in your biceps and in your triceps and your shoulders that you're not using when you're using, a bar. And I felt like that was the same thing that when I do these, I think I swing my fastest when I'm just working it nice and slow. Like one of the greatest exercises that I loved was, hooking up the band and just, getting into your golf posture and just do a nice and slow to your backswing, hold it, and then going all the way through. I've seen a tremendous jump in just general swing speed where, you can take one of do the weighted or the non-weighted, the over speed and under speed or underweighted or whatever. And I found that that's the most benefit for me because it's getting me used to keeping my body and my spine in that same position where I feel like I can swing for the fences and swing out of my shoes, but my spine's staying where it's supposed to be because I have the balance, I have the mobility, and I have, all those support muscles working where they should, if that makes sense.
100%. And what's cool about, the swing trainer is, assuming you're doing both sides to keep the balance, you only really need a handful of exercises. We're just launching what's called the Swing Trainer Warm-Up Station, and it's going to be in the PGA Superstores. It's going to be in Golf Galaxy and even Dick's Sporting Goods. And it'll be a warm-up station, and then hopefully at golf clubs where you're at the driving range, before you start smacking balls, you get on the station, and there's 3 exercises. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-minute warm-up, folks. So if you can't do 3-minute warm-up, I don't know what to tell you, but it's 3 exercises, and all you're doing is mobilizing your hips and your thoracic spine, creating some balance so that you feel athletic and activating the core muscles. And that's going to give you a better swing, more distance, and it's also going to protect your low back.
So this is the other thing that maybe you can help out. So if I wanted to start traveling with this, right, with the stringent, like, you're a gram over 50 pounds, you're paying $100 for your golf bag. How much weight is this? Am I putting this in the bag? Am I sacrificing having to drop a club?
It's 2.4 pounds with the entire setup. So
the whole thing.
Yeah. So the cord, the handlebar, and the carabiners is 2.4 pounds. So it's not. I mean, it's pretty light for travel. I mean, I don't know what else you could travel with as far as a golf training tool that's 2 pounds.
Yeah.
But it's worth taking it with. You can't. unfortunately, you can't carry it on because it's basically, they look at it like it's a striking instrument of destruction, you know?
Yeah.
And by the way, I've tried to do it before. You say we're not buying it. It was an exercise tool. And I showed them the videos and everything. Like, no, man, you're not getting on. But yeah,
hey, look, it's me in that app. It's me. That's me.
Yeah. You can put it in your bag and you know, ship that stuff out to wherever you're going. It's just such a great way to warm up. And you can hook it to a fence or your golf cart or a tree and really kind of, or a door anchor for your hotel room. And it's just a great way to warm up and keep in shape.
Yeah, because I remember on one trip, like where I'm about to start using this on like if I'm not training jiu-jitsu, I'm going to be using this again and start getting back into that program. And on the last trip I went on, I wanted to put it in the bag, but I've been working on trying to lighten up like my golf bag, you know, go in a lighter bag. And on the last trip I found that I was only at like 42 pounds with my full golf set. I put the golf balls in my carry-on bag and I was able to bring this and just pop it right in the bag. And, you know, so it made a tremendous difference with warming up, like where, you know, you get out to the range and like you said earlier, like, you know, there's guys, they take out their driver and they're just smashing drives. It's like, no, I got 3 to 5 minutes. I'm swinging with this, you know, like I'm doing exercises just to get my mobility there. So instead of me waiting to warm up by the 9th hole, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to play my best golf from 10 to 18. No, it started on hole number 1 because I was warmed up. And then just knowing that it's like 2.5 pounds, I know that I can get my golf bag down to, with all my clubs, to 41 pounds. I've got another 8 pounds that I could throw in there, and that's fantastic. So you can travel.
And I love that. And the only thing I might recommend, Joe, is, and I know you get geeked out on jiu-jitsu, but even if you did the swing trainer like a couple times a week, 20 minutes, I think the workouts are usually 15 to 25 minutes. So you spend 20 minutes. What's going to happen over time is, again, you're going to create symmetry and balance, but also you start building some capacity. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. They say, you know, they're strong. And some guys are strong in the gym, but they fall apart on the back 9. Why do they fall apart? Because they don't have that endurance component. So it's not just strength, it's strength and power over time. And the way you get that is you do these Golf Forever workouts on the app, and we take you through, you know, strength exercises, building up into power over time, and you start to build up your endurance, which leads into capacity. And that's where typically people have problems. And you see this in a lot of other sports. I mean, I grew up, you know, I spent a lot of time in Aspen, and skiing, I think 85% of the injuries occur at the end of the day, right? Because people have had a big lunch, they're tired, they're not used to the altitude, they're out of shape. And guess what? That's when you fall, is at 3:30 in the afternoon. And the next thing you know, you're in the ER. So, you know, you gotta build that capacity and put some effort and some discipline into training for golf so that you can play golf forever. And the beauty of it is that working with the swing trainer, it's reasonably low impact. So I think this, you know, if you suffer from, you know, autoimmune diseases like joint related illnesses like rheumatoid arthritis or any type of arthritis, I think this tool is a tremendous benefit. Plus with the app, I mean, there's a plethora. There's the golf yoga. You know, there's Dr. Jeremy has all those where if you have lower back pain, how to focus on that, or the shoulder pain. Shoulder pain, or that whole series on injuries or keeping yourself injury free. Yeah. You know, working out that, like, the app is phenomenal. And it's like, if I get some pains on my back, my hips start to, I have a couple of saved exercises, routines that I know after a day or two of doing this, like if I do the golf yoga, you know, it's a 20-minute, it's quite relaxing. It's very low impact. I find like all of a sudden my hips are fantastic. I just wish I had the time to do that whole thing before I went out to golf, you know, but my friends like booking 6:00 tee time. So it's like literally, nice. Yeah. So that makes it a little difficult. There is something special being on the course that early, you know, and there's something special about that. But your body does not really get moving, especially as you age, until a little bit later. So maybe even more important to try to get in again that 3-minute or 3 exercise warm up before.
No, and I think we talked about this earlier. Like I'm trying to figure out some moves that you haven't done already with using the swing trainer to do like real golf jitsu. That'll help golf, but also help jiu-jitsu, because I've showed this. So one of the things that I'm working on now is I got the keys to our gym because I needed some good space. And I started showing a couple of the guys I train with. They're like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a swing trainer for golf, but it was like kind of co-invented by a martial arts guy. So it's not something that's just for golf. It could be used for a plethora of things. That's why I said like where somebody who's suffering from rheumatoid arthritis that could use it because they can adjust the tension.
Yes.
It's low impact. So if they feel like this is too hard for them today, hey, step closer and take off some tension and just, get your mobility, get that hydration back into your spine or your joints. So I'm kind of working with a couple of guys I train with to try to figure out some exercises that you can do that would help for jiu-jitsu as well. So,
I love it. Well, you're gonna film those and you're gonna tag me on Instagram because
of course.
I'll give you my 2 cents on them. But really, almost every move, you're controlling rotational loads and you're producing rotational loads. And whether it's jiu-jitsu or basketball or tennis or golf, you have to control and produce rotation in all those sports. So really, again, centration, core activation, mobility, end range control, and then layering in speed and power and acceleration. And you're just creating more what I call golf athleticism, right? Golfers don't typically think of themselves as athletes. But let me tell you, man, you watch, Rory McIlroy, there's a great online, there's a great video of him slow-mo hitting his driver, right? And it's maybe a TaylorMade ad or something like that. And they have classical music playing to it. And it's like, I don't know, Handel or something, or Vivaldi or whoever it is. And it is like a symphony of motion, but also explosion. I mean, you see this guy coil up, and when he lets it go and he initiates that downward move towards impact, it's the most violent, destructive thing you've ever seen. And you watch that and you kind of go, oh, I guess I better get in shape for this sport. I mean, this is no joke. Now, we don't all hit the ball like Rory, but we all kind of want to, and we all want to move with some speed. You have to train for that speed. It does not come naturally. And if you're not training for it, you're going to end up seeing a chiropractor or physical therapist or, God forbid, an orthopedic surgeon.
Well, look at Scotty's swing. I remember I saw him for the first time last year. I didn't know who he was. I went to my first golf event. I went to the Ryder Cup in Whistling Straits. And we're on hole 16, and we're basically perched out at like the 280 mark. Because I was watching a couple of them hit it up to there. I was like, oh, even in this wind, they're still carrying the ball 280. This is phenomenal. But anyway, a ball comes up about 10 feet away from me, and it's Scotty. And I had no idea who he was. And I watched him hit this 3-wood from the rough. And I actually put out a video early on where like I did like slow motion of his swings because I was enthralled on his footwork, because how he slides and how he's like, it's
pretty unorthodox.
Very unorthodox, you know, and I was just like, and I remember going to, the person I was with, and I said, this kid's going to be somebody. Watch out for this kid's special. There's something about this kid where he's going to be something special. Then next thing you know, he won the Phoenix Open, Masters champion, now Players champion, back-to-back Phoenix champion, and being like, I'm a Callaway guy. Rahm is another one of my favorites with another very unorthodox swing where, he's got the club foot on his right foot's club foot. So the power and speed that he generates from what looks like a half swing is just inspiring. And the two of them are my favorite golfers on the planet. It's like it's like those old 90s and 2000 guys, like, well, if Tiger's not playing, I'm not watching. Well, if Scotty's not playing and they're not showing Rahm, I have no reason to watch because those are my guys. I feel a little bit more connected with Scotty, because I'm a huge fan of Teddy as well, his caddy.
Yeah.
But watching him swing, and the way he works his body, like you could see like this is a guy who he's going to play well into his 50s onto the Champions Tour. And I don't think he's going to have a lot of problems because his mechanics and his strength is where it needs to be. Where there's certain golfers, which I will not name, I watch them swing a club. I'm like, I give them 5 more years until they're getting L5 surgery because they're blowing out their discs.
Well, and that's one thing. And I love Scotty to death. One thing I wish he's so humble and so kind of unassuming. But sometimes I wish he would kind of look at the camera and say, guys, this is great. This is amazing. But I work hard for this. Like, you should see me in the gym before every round. I'm in the gym doing a full workout before every single round of golf. And if you don't believe me, follow this guy, Troy Van Beesen. He's a chiropractor out of Dallas, and that's who trains Scotty since he was in high school.
Yeah.
And these guys train like they're football players. Now, they're not lifting as heavy weights. They're not doing as high volume, obviously, during the season, but every single day he's doing push-pull movements. He's doing balance exercises. He's doing mobility work. He's doing strengthening for his core and his hips. And he works hard. And sometimes I think he's just got this, gee shucks, golly, I guess I'm pretty good. He works his butt off at the skill acquisition, but also in the gym. And I think that's really telling for his success.
No, he's the man as far as I'm concerned. Everybody talks about oh, there'll never be another Tiger. No, there's not going to be another Tiger. There's going to be somebody different. Just like when Arnie was around, there's never going to be another Arnie, but then here comes Jack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's different, and it's not necessarily better. It's not necessarily worse. It's different. And that's what I love about Scotty. He's hands down my favorite golfer, as is Jon Rahm, is another one of my favorites.
It's great. And I think that's what's cool about the sport. I mean, I guess a lot of sports, if you look at football, and you compared, I don't know, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes and Drew Brees or something, they're all 3 totally different athletes, played totally different games. But they all 3 are going to be Hall of Fame quarterbacks, So it's, I guess, styles make fights, styles make players, and different types of players are fun to watch. And it gives you some insight into biomechanics. There's some proper ways to do things, but there's not always one size fits all. And I think that's a great, part of that's challenging because you go to 3 different pros and 3 different guys or gals tell you to do 3 different things and you're like confused. So you got to find somebody that understands your body and what's going to be best for your body. And then make sure you have the mobility, the strength, and the balance to execute on your swing. And if you do your job off of the course and off of the range, the pro is going to have a much better time helping you do your job on the course or on the range.
Absolutely. I think for me, with my body, I have a very short torso and I'm all legs, so I've worked with coaches, cause I don't know if I ever told you this. I was a 3rd degree black belt in Taekwondo.
No,
so I started with Taekwondo when I was 12 and I went to 20 and whatnot. But anyway, I've worked with coaches. I worked with a couple of coaches that were very in tune to the biomechanics of my biomechanics. Were looking at me and saying, "Hey, this is the way. This is swing your swing, just like Scotty swings his swing." If a coach went and tried to no, you got to get your feet have to be quiet and this and that. Scotty's game is done. You know what I mean? Because it's not him, and that's what I think is super important. To remember. And I think the one of the things that the swing trainer has helped me develop was my swing and helping me through my body mechanics because I could feel, I feel a little weak here. I don't feel like this is doing what it's supposed to do for me. You know what I mean? Where I have to work on this as a weakness. So keep working on that and then building that muscle. And fortunately for me, it's easy for me to go lefty because I'm right-handed, but I played hockey lefty. So I grew up playing, you know, so this motion for me is fine. This was the weird motion when I started playing righty. So yeah, but now I'm okay, but whatever, that's it. But Pete, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us and tell us about your, you know, your history and what you've done and Golf Forever and the Swing Trainer. I truly appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and I love your passion and energy and enthusiasm and helping people just, you know, like actualize their human potential in golf and jiu-jitsu. And as one of my mentors used to always say, keep the dream alive.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks so much, Pete.
See you guys. Cheers. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Hoo-ha.